that experience of her biting someone after all of this time and all of the care I've put and effort I put into her was just kind of exactly what I needed to keep me on my toes and remind me that my job is never over as an owner of a reactive dog. Welcome to episode 28 of the Pawdoption Guide podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Muir, and this is your one-stop shop for the knowledge and advice you need to adopt and integrate the rescue dog of your dreams. If you're listening to today's episode, you might just be the owner of a reactive dog. Maybe you are way in over your head with your dog. Maybe you knew exactly what you were getting into, just like me. Or maybe you know a reactive dog and this just piqued your interest. Well, I'm certainly loving the fact that we're finally seeing a bit of a spotlight on reactive dog owners and reactive dogs in social media. So you might not have seen it so much, but like I am seeing it when I follow tons of dog trainers on Instagram and Facebook, and they're really sharing a ton about it right now. And even foster parents and dog rescues, I feel like they're getting a good handle on dog reactivity. And it's just great to see, because as a owner of a reactive dog, there is such a stigma. And, you walk your dog, you're embarrassed, you feel ashamed, and, you feel judged by others. It's one of those things that I think we need to do more talking about it so that we can start addressing it better and it can be less taboo. So I'm really excited about that trend that's happening right now. So if, you haven't been seeing those things, start following some dog trainers on Instagram. And, I'm hoping that today's episode kind of gives you an idea on how to address dog reactivity and manage it if you have a reactive dog in your life, and some of the ways where I, am positively affecting change in my dog so that their reactivity becomes less, my stress becomes less, and we have a better bond and a happier relationship at the end of the day, because we're working together and helping to just reduce triggers and keep the dog in a happy state, as well as the dog owner. Because, if you're not happy, your dog's probably not happy. So super important that you could both be calm, cool, and collected as you go about day-to-day life. So let's start with the basics here. What does a reactive dog really mean? Like, what does that term mean? Or dog reactivity, what is that? Well, I polled my Instagram followers and I had a few of their interpretations to share here with you before we get into kind of what I would say that really encapsulates. But what I got back was a reactive dog is aggressive, or it's a dog that reacts, lunges, whines, barks to certain environmental triggers. It's a dog that's aggressive when certain stimulus is in their environment. It's a dog that reacts to anything more than necessary for any reason. Or, some people will assume that it's negative or aggressive behavior. That's what reactive dog means, but maybe it could just be a new environment. Maybe it's just a dog that reacts more than just docilely, and it doesn't have to necessarily be aggressive. Well, you guys weren't way off. Aggression and reactivity are different things. And the best explanation I found for dog reactivity actually came from a website called behaviorvetsnyc.com. And so that's That's a website with a whole bunch of vets that are behaviorists, and they had a blog there, and this article was called Confessions from a Dog Trainer. I have a reactive dog. And in their article, it says, reactivity is an overreaction to external stimuli. A common display of reactivity is barking and lunging. Dogs may be reactive to people, animals, other dogs, noises, movement, or any combination of the above. Essentially, it is a reaction to something that is upsetting to your dog. And I just felt like that was the perfect explanation. A lot of people kind of, had one-note answers, but that one just really felt like all encapsulating for what dog reactivity is and how I've experienced it in my dogs. And there's a few factors that can cause your dog to be reactive. One of those is fear. Another is frustration. So, fear is being concerned about what is about to happen or what could happen, or not being happy in a certain scenario. Frustration is usually wanting something but not being able to do that. So we'll often see that with leash reactivity, that a dog may not be well socialized with another dog in the sense that they just know that they see dogs and they get to play with them. And so if they see a dog cross the road, all they want to do is just go play, or access that dog because that's what they've been taught seeing another dog means. Well, that's frustration that they're experiencing. Or, a dog that's been tied out on a leash in their front yard to see all the dogs walk by is likely to become very reactive to the dogs that walk by, because they're frustrated that they're stuck on this lead and they are just having to be stationary while experiencing these other dogs, enjoying the exercise, or having to constantly be territorial on your property because of the situation you've been put in. So that can be frustration as well. And then another factor can be past experience. So what has your dog gone through? Have they had a specific episode where something went bad? Like say they were on leash and a dog that was off leash came and attacked them? Well, you can bet that probably will set something off in your dog. And there are a lot of dogs who may experience, dog reactivity after a scenario like that. Maybe they went to the dog park and they had a poor socialization amongst dogs there. Maybe it was their experience growing up. Maybe there was a person in their household that they had to become fearful of. So maybe they experienced a lot of fear in their past experiences or in their youth, adulthood, in their life overall. If they were a puppy mill dog, you can bet they might be under-socialized and might have a lot of fearful experiences to draw from. And then otherwise, genetics. So certain breeds may be more prone to reactivity. If I look back to working in a vet clinic, I would say there were a lot of huskies that maybe were not the best on leash with the staff members of the vet hospital. I would say there were also a lot of border collies and herding dogs that might not be great with the staff at the vet hospital. So whether that's socialization or high energy, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the breed, but just the fact that they have high energy needs that might not be being met. Technically they're not getting everything they need to be a calm dog in that scenario. So yeah, those are kind of the few factors that really cause your dog to be reactive. And so, as I've kind of mentioned, I have technically 2 reactive dogs. So I first adopted my dog Geller, and he's about 10 years old now. And then, a few years after that, adopted our dog Rory, and she's about 7 years old now. And when we got Geller, he was pretty easygoing, no big deal. He didn't have a tendency to need to be around other dogs, but he seemed to get along with them just fine. So it wasn't that he was a dog that needed that social interaction. He was much more like, I want to be with my humans. Even at the dog park, he wouldn't stray too far. He kind of just go sniff around and come back. He didn't necessarily care to be with other dogs. He just enjoyed being off leash there. Well, we didn't really have any real negative experiences with him before we got Rory. And so when we got Rory, she was about 8 months old. She had limited socialization. We knew that her background was that her family had to give her up for adoption because they couldn't take her with them to a safe house. They were needing to leave the man in the household due to abuse. And we knew that from their shared experiences that Rory had spent a lot of time in her crate during puppyhood because that was safest for her, and that there was an abusive man in the household, so she did tend to have a fear of men. And right when we met her, we saw that she was quite fearful of us. We were strangers, and she pulled hard on leash. She was overstimulated by things like a leaf blowing by or a stump. And so even though we saw these behaviors, I knowingly took on these challenges after we had a little walk with her on our own. She just was quite docile with us, completely accepting of us at that point after she was away from her foster parents. So I could tell she had so much potential, and I really wanted to help her get to that and to see that through. So I was looking for a behavior challenge in a dog so that I could learn more about dog behavior and dog training. And so she was kind of that whole package. And we took her on knowing full well that she had a lot of work to be done. And following that, we really had to work on her walking skills because they were zilch. And so we would often walk her and Geller separately for a long, long period of time because we really had to work on her leash training. And eventually we were able to walk them together a bit, and that was going well. And then we would take them to the dog park together. And pretty quickly, we saw that she and Geller, when in the dog park now, had a pack mentality. Like they basically joined forces, and if one dog got their back up about some other dog, just didn't like the way they looked, or all of a sudden just had their shackles up or something, the other dog would join in and they'd pretty much just run and kind of jump all over that dog. And so we were, very cognizant of that from the moment it happened, and very much intervening and stopping it, and, had to leave the dog park, even though we had positive experiences with both of those dogs separately in the dog park. Otherwise, when they were together, this happened. So we did check and see how things went one more time. And again, we saw aggressive behavior almost from the get-go. So we left the park. We never went to the dog park with both of them after that. And so I believe that was a very negative experience, or something that just kind of solidified a change in their mindset from that point on, because that's when we started to experience dog reactivity on leash. So this is where I say that Geller definitely has dog reactivity. Geller definitely is a reactive dog on leash, although he is at this point in time fantastic, and I would say it's almost non-existent for him, whereas Rory is a bit more likely to be swayed or have a certain scenario kind of jostle her. So for the purposes of this podcast, I'll really just focus on Rory, because I do think that Geller's pretty much was just influenced by that scenario and by her presence and by her being so out of control. On top of that leash reactivity that Rory then had, we also knew that she was reactive to strangers coming in the home. When we drove her home from adopting her, she would bark at people just seeing them through the window of the car. So she was really alert and wanted to tell us, look, there's a person there. Oh, there's a person there. Oh, there's a person there. She's reactive to noises. So if she can hear a car door slam, doesn't really quite know where it's coming from, or maybe she does know where it's coming from, she's going to tell us, oh, there's a car door, and bark. Even if we're in the upstairs bathroom and we close a drawer, she might bark because of the bang. She was reactive to squirrels or bunnies while on leash outside, reactive to bikes that would come in close proximity, or jogger. I quickly realized we shouldn't walk at night because people could easily surprise us. Like, I would have less ability to make sure we were a comfortable distance from people because of how dark it was. And so we actually had a scenario where a jogger kind of just like flew by us, and she lunged at them and tried to bite them, and she didn't get them. But at that point, I knew, okay, that's serious business. She tried to bite that person. They spooked her. They scared her. But it's still not okay that was her reaction. So thank goodness, I always had her in good control at that point in time. But, you just never know when that instance might come that could happen. And you might remember, if you had the opportunity to listen to one of my earlier podcast episodes, episode 8, which I called My Worst Day as an Owner of a Reactive Dog and How I'm Better for It. In that episode, I detail how she bit the first person she's ever bit. And that was just recent, like last October or something that occurred. And it was still mortifying to think about, but feel free to go check out that episode 8. And, it was really telling and was the reminder I needed that my dog is a reactive dog, and that hasn't just gone away. And despite all the effort and time I put into training her over the last 7 years, we have, come so far. But many of these behaviors still exist today, just in a lesser state, a more manageable, a more acceptable state, a state where we can both be calm and cool and collected 98% of the time. But there's still underlying behaviors, and they're still there, and they're probably going to be there for life. And that experience of her biting someone after all of this time and all of the care I've put and effort I put into her was just kind of exactly what I needed to keep me on my toes and remind me that my job is never over as an owner of a reactive dog. So let's get to the positive stuff, the stuff that is going to change how you deal with your reactive dog. The main things that really help me manage Rory as a reactive dog, and Geller too, as I experienced that in response to Rory's behavior. So here is how I manage my reactive dog. So 1, advocating for them. So the first part to being able to help your dog and better them and train them out of these poor behaviors is by understanding them. You got to start thinking like your dog. why is this a threat? Why would this be worrisome for them? And start advocating for them. So you have to understand them, start to learn their triggers. What are the things that set them off? And even if they're just tiny things, start really paying attention to those and observe and act upon their body language. So always taking in how they're processing information, how they're processing things they're seeing, and what their body signals are to you that show that they are not comfortable. And this is really where you're going to be able to go, okay, these are the instances we need to pay close attention to and set them up for success in. And, you really want to reduce the situations that make them uncomfortable, especially right off the hop. And, once we start managing things and get your dog into a more calm and collected state in which we can handle them and walk them through scenarios better, you really want to reduce those triggers overall and only face one trigger at a time if possible. So really try to cut down on the overwhelm for them. So that's one of the ways you can advocate for them, is just by not exposing them to all the things that are going to be triggers for them, and just break it down so we can take things more slowly and at a pace that's going to hopefully let you see progress and help you reward good behavior. And one of the biggest parts of this, advocating for them, is to tell other people, tell visitors, tell strangers how they need to be around your dog. I would say this is where I would had the hardest time at the start was, when people would enter our house and I didn't want Rory to be barking at them. But I also wanted her to feel comfortable with them, was having to explain right from the get-go how I wanted them to enter the house, or if they could please text me before they were on their way over so I would know about how long it would be till they got there, so I could be managing her behavior when they did arrive, so that we wouldn't have a big display of barking and everything, that I could be on top of those things, training them appropriately during those scenarios. That's one of the key things, is to be able to advocate for your dog in that way. So another huge part of that was, telling your visitors, okay, so I don't want you to approach my dog. She's scared of strangers. So if you can sit down on the couch and, you can let her come to you, no need to pet her, or please don't pet her. Just let her come to you. And if she's comfortable and staying near you, then you can always, rub her chest or whatever your dog's comfortable with. Maybe your dog will not allow any touching, right? Then that's okay. You say, my dog's going to come sniff you. Don't touch my dog. Just let them be. They just need to come see you. Or my dog's going to stay in its crate the whole time. Whatever your scenario is for your dog and what they can't handle, you need to explain that to your visitors. One way in which I learned I needed to advocate for Rory was by making her a vest which said ask before petting. And that was huge. We had gone to a track and my husband was playing flag football. And so I took Rory with me and I ran with her around the track. And there were a lot more people there than I expected. And they, of course, saw a Dalmatian and thought, oh my goodness, I guess gotta pet that Dalmatian, and just would come over. And I didn't even have the ability to say, don't touch her, before they were starting to. And so, not good manners on their part, but that can happen. And what are you going to do if you have a reactive dog? So I had enough control of her. She didn't bite them, but she did lunge toward them and try to bite that person who was trying to pet her. Basically, she didn't even have any eyes on this person. They just came up and were about to pet her bum without her even looking at them. So quite surprising experience. But from that point on, I knew, okay, some people are just going to come up to my dog and I might not even have the ability to tell them no. And so that's where we got this vest for her, and we started to have her wear it almost all the time. And just recently, I've been reminded by that experience where she bit someone last October that she needs to wear that whenever she's out in public. And so I've become much more stern about that as a rule, and started to do that, because any little thing I can do to make sure she doesn't cause any harm to anyone is well worth it. And if that means she wears a vest all the time, that means she wears a vest all the time. Another way I manage my reactive dog is managing their environment. So this kind of goes hand in hand with advocating for them, but there are many ways we can reduce how overwhelmed our dog is by their triggers on a day-to-day basis. And by reducing that overwhelm, we take their mental state and their anxiety down from like a, maybe an 8 to like a 6. And that can be so beneficial in reducing the bad behavior that we see as a response to the triggers. So whether that's barking or lunging or whatever, or, just whining, any of that behavior can be reduced greatly just by managing their environment, just by changing things up a little bit, adjusting what you do or what your routine is in order to reduce that overwhelm. So I'm talking about things like if your dog likes to look out the window and bark at other dogs or people walking by, or the male person, having frosted windows or having your window coverings up so that they can't do that. Right? Those are ways to keep your dog from fixating and displaying bad behavior. And as we know with dogs, the more they display a bad behavior, the more they're able to practice that bad behavior, the harder it is to break that habit. So this is super helpful in taking them from bad behavior to good behavior. Okay, so this is just the first step, is really just reduce that overwhelm. You can put barriers to encourage boundaries within the house. So if your dog, might be reactive to the kids playing, then you can put up a barrier so that they can't get to the playroom. Or, even just setting up barriers within the house can be a reminder that you're in charge. You get to decide where they go. They can't just go run upstairs, jump on the bed and look out the window up there if they want, right? It kind of restricts their access a bit, which can be, again, helpful in basically establishing yourself as the leader in your household, and that they don't have to be the one telling you about every, car or person that walked by or all the things that they heard that day. Another way you can manage their environment if, say, they're reactive within the household is, if they have alert barking, you can use white noise. We will use white noise on Alexa occasionally and find that can be quite helpful in reducing her sensitivity to noises. And, if you have a dog that maybe doesn't always get along well with the other dog in the household, creating barriers or boundaries, dividing those dogs up when you're not around to watch, or even just having them divided when you are around so that, they can feel more confident and calm and collected. So some dogs that are reactive may be reactive to any of their resources being used, like their food, water, or their toys. So dividing those things up, again, that's just managing their natural environment at home, and that can be really beneficial. And if we're talking about leash reactivity or dog reactivity when on leash, one of the biggest things you can do there is by managing how much space they have between them and the other dog. So if another dog's coming right toward you on the same side of the street, then maybe you choose to cross the street and walk on the other side. Or maybe you just choose to cross and walk down the road while they're walking past on the sidewalk. Or maybe you found your dog is better with a sit-stay beside you while that dog walks by. All those things can be really helpful in managing their exposure, managing their overwhelm, and only you can know what exactly they require, how much space they'll require between you and the other dog, what's their threshold there before they get really upset by having to cross paths with that dog or that thing or that person. The next thing I do to manage my reactive dog is counter conditioning. So it's all well and good to, reduce the overwhelm and try and give them a safe, little network and keep their environment as comfortable as possible and everything, and always tell people, to treat them this way or that way. But in the end, that's kind of just a response to that negative behavior, and you're just kind of like trying to stifle it a little bit. But of course, if you're not doing anything to work against it and to create better experiences or counteract the negative associations or stressors with some positive praise and rewards, then you're not really going to get very far. So counter conditioning is super beneficial for dogs that are reactive, because we need to help them unlearn their fears or past experiences as much as possible. And through repetition and consistency, we can change the narrative that they have had. Maybe we can't completely eradicate some of their fears, some of their anxieties, but we can greatly change them. All of these things are super important and come together and really help your dog, and not one thing is going to do the trick. But counter conditioning, I would say, really took me, especially on our walks, from being very stressed and anxious to being much more calm and collected, because I now had a tool to use. I had a tool that I could rely on and that would help me get out of stressful situations and help me feel prepared. So counter conditioning is, just setting up scenarios and practicing and encouraging new associations by giving positive praise and rewards to our dogs. So things that they would have usually had a negative association to, like, say, the doorbell. If you want to practice on dealing with the doorbell, well, maybe you're going to work on knocking at the door first and then work your way up to short little sounds of a doorbell and then making the doorbell sound louder. And you're basically just prompting that while giving a reward immediately to your dog at the same time, and continually exposing them to that while giving them a positive reward. And, you can't just go full on and start with the full trigger. You have to kind of break it down into smaller steps. So if Rory is reactive to people coming in the front door, I want to make the front door opening a positive thing. So going to the front door, you might click and give them a treat just by going to it. And then the next step is turning the door handle. And the next step is pulling the door open a little. And the next step is pulling it wide open. The next step is saying hello. So treating and giving them praise and rewards at those times, as well as giving them where the place they need to be or the behavior they need to provide to deserve those rewards, is a great way to counteract the negative things they have come to learn. So yeah, you can set up those scenarios, and we're talking about practicing these things rather than just always dealing with them in real time as these problems come up. So you don't just work on these things as you're walking by a dog or as you're as you're having company come over. You try to do these scenarios many times otherwise. And then you can also use the counter conditioning in those moments too. So specifically with walking with dogs on leash, making sure you have great control with your dogs in your house on leash and in your backyard on leash where they have less distractions. But then also out on the street, then kind of preempting any reaction by clicking or giving a treat, or just giving a treat and saying yes because you want to reward them for the great behavior they're giving you currently. And then as you're, seeing a dog far in the distance, the second you can see it and you think they'd see it, that's when you're giving them the reward. You're not just waiting till they're highly reactive and right near the dog. You want to, the second, they could possibly see them, you're giving them that reward, and you're continuing until you're past that distraction so that they're focusing on that reward. And you may have to use some pretty fantastic rewards for this counter conditioning while your dog is on leash, because that's a highly distracting environment. And so those rewards have to be that much better. So we're talking like little pieces of hot dog or liver treats, or even for my dog who has some special diet, I give her some pieces of scrambled egg, even like little pieces of cheese. Little things like that can be super helpful in getting more attentiveness from your dog in those highly distracting scenarios. And the last thing that I do to manage my reactive dog is consistently pivot. I am always pivoting. In the 7 years that I've been managing Rory and her reactivity, I have never stopped adjusting my approach, which this is going to happen with all reactive dogs. You will probably hit a plateau. You will find you get to a point where their progress is just halted, or your dog has regressed in training. So, sometimes if I send my reactive dog off to stay with someone else for a week, she comes back worse. And that's just the way it is. And I have to start back from not square one, but, start back a few steps and see if I can get her back to the more content and social and confident dog that I've made her over the past few years. So sometimes, there is a bit of a relapse, you might say. And so it's important to always be willing to readjust or to pivot, to find new things, new approaches, new tools, more patience, because sometimes certain things just won't work for your dog anymore and you got to try something new. And it can be a little frustrating because you might not know what you need to do next, but I can guarantee you there's always another way. And sometimes it's just returning to the old approach, but sometimes it is new things. So new and better rewards, new exercise. I had stopped playing with my dog Rory in our backyard, I realized, until just recently. I was just letting her enjoy, sniffing around the yard, and she would play with Geller on occasion. They'd run around, tear around. I would occasionally throw a ball for her, but she didn't necessarily sometimes she does get into that, and sometimes she doesn't want to play fetch. Well, the other day I picked up a rag and we were playing tug of war with that, and she loved it. And I was like, I need to start doing this again with her. And this can be a good energy outlet. I also, ran her for the first time in a long time the other day too, because I was seeing her alert behaviors kind of increasing a bit, that alert barking happening more, just her being a bit more on edge. And so I thought, we need to, give her a little bit more stimulation, and that can come in exercise, but that can also come from things like Kongs, food puzzles, maze bowls, and, maybe doing scent training with her, doing 5 to 10 minute training exercises. But one thing we do know is that when you train your dog, it's really great if they have had some of those energy needs met too. That can be really helpful as well. So that can reduce the stress or the anxiety that they currently are experiencing. And then another thing, muzzle training. Some of these things are ways to address their behavior, not to kind of be like, well, let's try a new approach. Let's try this this halty, this head collar, or let's try this harness if we're having a hard time controlling them on leash, or whatever you have to do for your safety. Like, just be ready to take another stab at it in a different way. And one of those ways might be finding a trainer. And we did at one point hit a big plateau right after getting Rory. I think we'd had her for, I don't know if it was a year at that point or less than that. I feel like it was less than that. We were just like, we've hit a big plateau. We've been seeing so much progress and we're so happy with how far we've come. But I think it's time. And we got a trainer, and that, again, just propelled us forward that much more to hit a new level and then a new level and a new level. So that's also a great tool in your toolkit as someone who has a reactive dog. That can change so much for you. And a trainer can help you point out, places where you're as an owner being inadequate. You're maybe giving off too much anxiety or nervousness on your walks, that your dog's totally picking up on that, and that's where some of their behavior is coming from. Or you're reacting like this, which is making them more reactive. So trainers are great at being able to see those scenarios. It's like having a therapist almost, that they can see things that you might not be able to see and point those things out for you, or be a sounding board for that. So don't hesitate to look at getting a trainer if you have a reactive dog. If your dog has leash reactivity, find out the exact steps I took to go from embarrassed to confident with my reactive dog via my free tools, aids, and techniques to walk your dog with confidence video course. Find the link in the show notes or find it at www.pawdoptionguide.com/walk your dog with confidence mini course. So just to review how I manage my reactive dog: 1, advocating for them and understanding them, always observing them and acting upon their body language so that you can foresee or prepare or prevent things from occurring. 2, managing their environment, just helping lessen the overwhelm for them on a regular basis is going to keep them more open to learning. 3, counter conditioning. So counteracting the negative associations they have with things by teaching them that they can be positive. And how can we do that? Well, positive praise. So just, yes, good dog, great, good work, Rory, that, but also rewards, and more importantly, rewards. So whether that's like a little game of tug or a toy that your dog gets to hold in its mouth when they do something good, or food. And food can be so powerful in this situation. Do not underestimate it. And if you think your dog is not responsive to food, then it's very likely that you just haven't found the right food. Okay, so really work hard to find those motivating treats and rewards for your dog, because that is going to be huge in helping you create some positive experiences with the things that they used to find only negative, okay? And sometimes all you have to do is just get them experiencing that positive reward just prior to when they would have been, set off in the past, or what would have made them reactive. So you have to kind of get ahead of that feeling and start to change the narrative for them. And lastly, number 4 is by pivoting. Be willing to change your approach. Know that it's not always just going to be A, B, C, D. It's not just natural progression of steps. You may have a plateau, and you may need to reassess your approach to your dog's behavior because you're just not seeing the change or the response that you used to. That's really common with reactive dogs, and what makes a good reactive dog owner is just that willingness to not give up on them and to know that something has affected them or or not affected them to take them to the place they are now. And a lot of the times it's you. Oh, we kind of just let that go. We kind of stopped being consistent with that, and I haven't been doing as much training with them, or they've been really bored lately, or we're not getting any exercise. Like, all those things contribute to why your dog is acting why they are. So know that you may have to do new things, try something different in order to get them back to making progress or back to being a cool, calm, collected dog. I don't believe there will be a day where Rory is no longer a reactive dog. And you might think that's a terrible fate, but I don't look at it that way. I take great pride in knowing how far she has come, because I have not given up on her. And I often think, oh my gosh, what if someone else had gotten her? I highly doubt they would have put this much time and effort into her, and that she would be as, wonderful a dog as she is in our household. And I also just get immense relief and joy knowing that I am providing her with the safety and comfort that she's always dreamed of. Being the owner of a reactive dog is not a responsibility I take lightly, and certainly at times it can weigh on you that you must always bear the responsibility of being observant and prepared to do your best by them. But I would not have it any other way. She is 100% worth it. I bet if you ask many other reactive dog owners, I bet you they'd say the same thing, that it's 100% worth it. And if you don't feel that way right now, I hope that breaking down my experience with Rory and how I manage her reactive behavior, I hope that gives you a lot of confidence in knowing these are basically the steps. These are the main tools you need in your kit in order to make progress and to move forward and be so much happier and both be better bonded for it. And if you're dealing with a reactive dog and you just want to talk to me a bit more about it, I'd love to hear your experience and to see if there's any advice I can give you on top of what I shared today. So feel free to just send me a message via Instagram or Facebook at Pawdoption Guide. I'd be more than happy to chat with you. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. Grab a screenshot, post it in your Instagram or Facebook story, and tag at Pawdoption Guide. There will be new episodes up every other Thursday. Thanks a bunch for listening.